What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. I know that most of you have already drafted, so now we got to talk about the waiver wire and my favorite pickups that could be available. Some of the players I'm about to talk about are so disrespected. They are being slept on a lot of platforms, and I think their roster percentage is going to skyrocket very soon. Starting with forwards, let's talk about these gems. The number one player being Dylan Guenther of the Utah Hockey Club. Guenther's roster percentage on Yahoo currently is 39%. What are we doing here, guys? He has right wing eligibility. He was on pace for 32 goals last year and 220 shots, despite only averaging around 16 minutes of ice time per game. He's in the top 6. He's on the first line power play. And yeah, I mean, this guy's a stud. He's a future 40 goal scorer in the NHL. And I think he's going to have a fantastic season. Guenther's a player who, in my opinion, is going to put up 30 plus goals, 250 plus shots, a ton of power play points, and I think when it matters the most in the fantasy playoffs, he is going to be a stud. With that being said, I think Guenther should be rostered in any leagues with 8 teams or more. Might be a hot take, guys, but I'm very high on Guenther. Next, we'll talk about JJ Peterka, one of my other favorite breakouts this year. 51% rostered is solid. It sounds like people are catching on to how good Peterka was last year, despite limited ice time and despite limited power play time. But still, we're going to see this roster percentage go way up. This guy's playing first line with Tuck and Thompson. He's on the first line power play. 28 goals last year, despite only 3 of them coming from the man advantage. 50 points with only 7 points coming from the man advantage. He's going to be on the first line power play this year, racking up power play points. And I could see him putting up 30 plus goals and 60 plus points. There's even upside for more than that, guys, but he's probably going to be around like an 80% rostered guy or more. So I suggest you pick him up before it's too late. Next is Gabriel Velarde. This is obvious. First line on the Jets, first line power play, on pace for 36 goals last year, center and right wing eligibility. This is a no-brainer to me. We're going to see his roster percentage probably go to like 85 to 90% in the next couple of months. So do yourself a favor and pick him up. Next, we got Boone Jenner. Yes, it depends what type of league you're in, but in most leagues, peripherals matter. And this guy's a monster when it comes to shots, hits, and blocks. He's first line power play. He's kind of a band-aid, but he should be higher rostered than this, so he's a great pickup. Next, we got to talk about the player in the thumbnail, and that player is Rickard Rakell of the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's just crazy to me that his roster percentage is 7%. This is a guy who puts up monster shots, really good hits. He is 2 years removed from putting up 60 points, and this season, he is back on the first line power play. Rakell struggled last year. He was taken off that first unit, but all we've seen throughout camp and preseason, which is like 2 weeks at this point, is Rakell on that first line power play with Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Brian Rust, and now Erik Karlsson. Initially, I thought it was going to be Bunting on this first unit before we saw what happened in camp, and I talked about that in my new sleeper video. But the truth is, guys, Rakell should be rostered in any leagues with 12 teams or more. You can even argue that if your league counts hits, he should be rostered in a 10-team league as well. So 7% is absolutely insane, and this is going to skyrocket very soon. Next up, let's talk about a couple more players. Jack Quinn of the Buffalo Sabres. He's in the top 6. He's on the first line power play. He loves to score goals. He has right wing eligibility, and he's a very young player who could break out. So yeah, in my opinion, 20% is way too low. Another great pickup is Josh Norris. I know it's a little bit risky. He may be cooked with his shoulder, but he is back and healthy, supposedly. He's in the top 6. He's on the first line power play. And we are only a couple of years removed from him being on pace for like 40 goals. So I just think there's a lot of upside with this play. And we're probably going to see 17% go way up. Next up, a couple of more guys here. Jake Neighbors. Currently, he's first line and first line power play. He might not stay first line even strength the entire season, but it seems like his deployment on the power play is pretty secure. So that's a plus. And he's a guy that puts up a lot of hits. So if your league counts hits, he is a must-add player. Now, when I say must-add player, I'm not talking about 10-team leagues or less, but I think if your league counts hits, he should be rostered in any leagues with 12 teams or more. Next up, we have to talk about Victor Olofsson. His roster percentage on Yahoo is currently 5%, and this is way too low. As of right now, what we're seeing is Olofsson on the first line with Jack Eichel, and also on the first power play unit as well. You guys need to understand that Olofsson is very solid offensively. He just hasn't been given the proper deployment in the last couple of years. With that being said, with this deployment, first line and first line power play, there's a very good chance we see 16 plus minutes of ice time per game, and that means there's a chance he puts up 30 plus goals and 60 plus points. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but 5% is way too low for the deployment that he currently has, so you need to pick this guy up before it's too late. The next gem we have to talk about is Anthony Duclair. And the reason why he's a gem is because throughout preseason and camp, we've seen him on the first line power play. Duclair is currently first line with Barzal and Horvat, and he's getting reps on the first unit. So if that sticks, there's massive value with this current roster percentage of 16%. Moving on, we have some deeper league gems. I'm just going to go with these rapid fire. Fabian Zetterlund, top 6, decent power play time, amazing shots, hits, and blocks. So very good in those banner leagues, those category leagues. Only 11% rostered. Add him if you're in one of those leagues. Kirill Marchenko, 10%. First line power play. The best goal scorer on the Blue Jackets at this current moment. Could put up a lot of shots as well, so definitely a good play in a deeper league. Kirby Dach, second line center, and also on the first line power play with Slafkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield, and Matheson. Could be very solid, even though he only has center eligibility. 8% is pretty low, so good option as well. Barrett Hayden, first line with Keller, first line power play, only center eligibility, but 7% is too low considering this deployment. Puts up good shots and hits as well, so look at him as well. Moving down, we have Maxime. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, guys. He's new to the league. He came from the KHL this year, signed with the Islanders. But in camp, he's in the top 6, and they said that he earned that role and that spot. He's on a line with Brock Nelson now. And we also saw near the end of camp and in one of the last preseason games that he was on the first line power play as well. I don't know if this is going to stick, and I'm not going to tell you that it's going to stick, but yes, there is a chance that this guy's top 6 and the net front player on the Isles power play. So considering his roster percentage is only 3%, he could be a massive steal. Finally, at 2% rostered, we have Alex Laferriere of the Los Angeles Kings. Well, Laferriere, he has seen a lot of reps on the first line with Kempe and Kopitar, and we've also seen him on the first line power play over Byfield the entire camp. So it's definitely a very good sign that he could be on the power play to start the season. And yeah, I mean, at 2% rostered, he could be available in a lot of deeper leagues and provide a lot of value. I also want to mention a short-term stream, that player being Casey Middlestat of the Colorado Avalanche. Yes, he doesn't put up great peripherals, but with all those guys being out, like Lehkonen, non-contact jersey skating, Nichushkin not returning until the middle of November, Landeskog's timeline being unclear, Middlestat finds himself on the first line power play. With his current deployment, top 6 first line power play, I think he could be a good stream for the next month or so. So I would take a look at him. Okay, now I quickly want to talk about players that I think I have too low of a roster percentage. Definitely higher roster percentage than some of the other guys I talked about, but Nazem Kadri at 67% I think is too low. He should be an 80% or more guy, even though he only has center eligibility. Brian Rust, he's been a point per game player pretty much every season except 2 years ago. So yeah, this guy should be higher rostered for sure. First line power play, great peripherals. And then Jared McCann. Yes, McCann doesn't put up the greatest peripherals, but we are only 2 years removed from him putting up 40 goals. And we have some new mystery upside with the new head coach. And we could see a bump in deployment for McCann. But yeah, I just think this guy is a great goal scorer. He's going to put up a lot of shots as well. And we could see his roster percentage go to like 80% or plus very soon. So I would suggest taking a look at McCann. Moving on, let's talk about defensemen. The number 1 defenseman that has way too low of a roster percentage is Justin Falk of the St. Louis Blues. Falk puts up monster peripherals. He's an elite goal scorer for a defenseman. We know he was battling injuries last year. And now with Torrey Krug out, there is not a lot of competition for the first line power play. With that being said, Falk could put up 10 plus goals, 50 points, amazing shots, hits, and blocks. And this is a guy, in my opinion, who should be like 90% rostered based off some of the other defensemen that are higher rostered than this guy. So do yourself a favor and pick him up before it's too late. The other guys I've talked about, Brant Clark, first line power play on the Kings, takes a lot of shots. And this is a no-brainer for me, 28% rostered. There's no way it should be this low. Like, he should be rostered in any leagues with 10 teams or more. And you could argue like an 8-team league, he should be rostered as well. So yeah, I would take a look at him if you need a defenseman, or if you have some other defensemen that you're rostering that's not that good, that's not on the first line power play, replace that guy with Clark. The other player is Adam Boquist, currently first line power play in the Panthers. Yes, his peripherals are trash, but this deployment on one of the best power plays in the league is not something to overlook. So 8% rostered is way too low in my opinion. Then you also have Jake Wallman, really good shots and blocks, First line power play on the Sharks potentially. We don't know exactly what that power play is going to look like, but we've seen him get reps on the first unit in camp and in preseason. So I'm definitely optimistic about it. And he can score goals too. So yeah, definitely a big fan of Wallman, especially with a 13% roster percentage. Then lastly, we have Erik Karlsson. Yes, we saw in camp Sider on the first unit a couple of days ago. They could just be trying it out. But all the other days, Gustafsson was on that first unit. And in my opinion, I'm expecting Gustafsson to be on that first unit to start the year. So there's a chance he could put up like 50 plus points, put up a lot of power play points. Yes, his peripherals aren't great, but there's no way his roster percentage should only be 6%. Moving on, let's talk about goalies. These goalies I'm about to talk about aren't the best in certain leagues, like category leagues, like the default category league settings on Yahoo. But in most points leagues, and also category leagues that tend to favor volume, these guys could be solid. With that being said, Tristan Jarry is the number one guy you need to look at. 46% roster is too low. And the reason why you need to take a look at him is because the backup, Alex Nedeljkovic, is week to week with an injury. The main concern with Jarry in points leagues is that he wasn't going to get that volume. But now with Ned out, Jarry is going to see significant volume on a team that is still okay, right? They may not be a playoff team, but they'll get wins and he'll get peppered with shots. So yeah, Jarry is a massive value, only being 46% rostered. And if you need a goalie, please take a look at him. The other goalies are Samuel Ersson. No, he might not see the most volume compared to some other goalies, but you could see 45 to 50 games. The Flyers were pretty good last year. They almost made the playoffs, and they seem to favor him being the number one goalie on this team. So I think 17% rostered is way too low. With the others, we have Peter Mrazek. He could see a lot of volume on the Blackhawks like he did last year. I don't know if he's going to have these same stats because he was pretty good last year considering the Blackhawks being so bad, but 11% roster is pretty low with the volume that he could provide. And then you have Elvis on the Blue Jackets. Yes, the Blue Jackets are probably going to be one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the NHL this year, but he could get peppered with shots and see like 55 plus games. So if your league values volume, he could be solid. With that being said, here's some short-term options. Archer Shilovs of the Vancouver Canucks, 28% rostered. This is a guy that's going to see the majority of the games while Demko is out with his muscle injury, which, by the way, we have no timeline for. So, I mean, I would definitely take a flyer on Shilovs as your number one goalie, considering what we know about this Demko injury. The Canucks are a playoff team, so he's going to rack up wins. And there's a chance that Demko is dealing with this all season, and they have to have a number one goalie. So it could be Shilovs. It could be Kevin Lankinen, who they just signed recently, but Shilovs has the best chance to get a lot of starts. So yeah, his roster percentage is way too low. The next short-term option is Lucas Stolzel of the Anaheim Ducks. John Gibson, he had his appendix removed, so he's out like 3 to 4 weeks. So I would definitely pick him up if you're streaming goalies, especially if you're in a points league that typically value saves because the Ducks love to get peppered with shots. So yeah, in the short term, I think Dostal is really solid. Moving on, I just want to talk about players who I think are rostered a bit too high, and there's better options on your wire potentially. So let's break this down. First player is Brandon Hagel. He's on the second line with Cam Atkinson and Anthony Cirelli, and even though it was looking promising at the start of the camp with him on the first line power play for multiple days, it seems like that's not the case anymore, and they're trying out a bunch of different guys. So there's a chance that Hagel is second line with those guys, Atkinson and Cirelli, and also on the second line power play. And if that's the case, I can't see him putting up more than 60 or 65 points. He's also a player that doesn't put up great shots, hits, or blocks. So I just think 90% roster is a little bit too high. And yeah, I'm not the biggest fan at this current moment. Other guys here, Brent Burns. Burns, his shot volume's going down. He doesn't put up good hits or blocks. And he is not on the first line power play anymore at Shane Goss's spare. So I just think this is way too high. There's much better options. Like I would much rather have Justin Falk on my team. I would much rather have Brant Clark and some of these other guys. So yeah, way too high of a roster percentage. With these others, I'll just go rapid fire. Jeff Skinner, yes, he could be solid, but he's not first line power play. Doesn't put up the best peripherals. I think there could be better options potentially in your league, so keep that in mind. Matt Duchene, I don't think he's going to have the same year as last year. He's on the second unit. He might get third liner minutes at times, probably in the top 6 on the second line. But yeah, I just think this is way too high, and there's better options, like some of the gems I talked about at the start. Moving down, we have Gustav Nyquist, no longer first line power play, horrible peripherals, regression is coming, not a fan. Kuzmenko could be good in some leagues, but Calgary may sell throughout the year, like close to the deadline. And he puts up horrible shots, hits, and blocks. Like, even if your league doesn't count hits, the shot volume is so bad that he's at such a massive disadvantage that he's usually not worth rostering in a lot of leagues, and a lot of people don't understand this. So, not a huge fan of Kuzmenko. Then you have Bowen Byram. He's not on the first line power play. His ceiling is massively capped. Yes, he could be okay, but I just think 45% is a little bit too high. And there's no way Byram should have a higher roster percentage than Justin Falk. Then you have Lane Hudson. There's no guarantee that he even makes the team right now. I don't know if we have any news. Maybe when I post this, we will have news on that front. But even if he does, he might be second line power play, and he's going to put up terrible peripherals. So I just think this is too high. Then you have Sean Durzi, not on the first line power play, not a fan. Logan Stankoven, 41% is too high, guys. Like, why does Dylan Guenther have a lower roster percentage than Logan Stankoven? Makes no sense. Owen Power, also a guy that is not on the first line power play, and I don't think he's going to be that good. Like, 30 points is his ceiling, in my opinion. Maybe I'll be wrong. Like, I love Buffalo this year, guys, but I think in fantasy, he's not the best option. Then the two last guys here, Vladimir Tarasenko. I know 36% is not some big number, but it's still high for my liking considering what we know about what they're doing with the first power play units, and just with what we know about Tarasenko and where he's at in his career. So not a big fan. And then William Karlsson. Karlsson might not be on the first unit even when he's healthy, and he's currently injured as well. So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan. And also regression is probably going to hit William Karlsson in the goal scoring department. So yeah, definitely not a fan of William Karlsson in fantasy. Just some training camp news for you. Flames signed Tyson Barrie. They still have Waiver on the first line power play in camp, but could be a little bit concerning. I don't think they're going to take Waiver off that first unit because they want to keep his value high in case they trade him. But something to keep in mind, we also have Shea Theodore back in the first line power play. I don't know what to tell you guys. I'm sorry. I drafted a lot of Hanifin. In my best ball drafts, I drafted 115 teams. I think I drafted Hanifin in 25% of those drafts. So yeah, I don't know. Cassidy said like 5 or 6 days ago that he expects Hanifin to be on that first unit to start the year. And then we see him preseason tonight and in camp, in practice, Theodore is back on that unit. So I don't know. We'll see. I do want to say though, Cassidy said they're both going to get looks. And a lot of people expect it to be a very fluid situation where it's sometimes going to be Hanifin on that first unit and sometimes it's going to be Theodore. So I wouldn't panic if you own Hanifin, but it's definitely not good news. And it's definitely something I didn't expect considering the contract situation of Hanifin and Theodore. And yeah, we'll just have to see what happens. We do have to also mention that Theodore is a Band-Aid. So if he goes down, you know Hanifin's getting that first power play deployment. So yeah, that's an update. We'll see what happens. Some other ones here. Hagel is no longer on the first line power play. Yes, he could be throughout the year, but they're trying out a bunch of different players. Radish is currently on the first unit. They've tried Atkinson, and they're probably going to try Paul and others until they find the right guy. So yeah, not the best news for Brandon Hagel. In other news, Tavares is back in the top 6. They moved Nylander to the wing. I think Tavares is massively slept on, guys. Great shots, great hits. 30-plus goal potential, 70-point potential. And, yeah, Tavares is available in your league, especially a league that counts peripherals. I suggest you pick him up. Some other injury news. Sorokin is practicing. He's facing shots. He wants to be ready for the home opener, which is really good news. And, yeah, I wouldn't be concerned about Sorokin based off what we've seen so far. Another injury update is Panarin. He has a lower body injuries day-to-day. We'll see how that progresses, but obviously didn't like him leaving that preseason game. And then with Erik Karlsson, we do have good news. He is back practicing in a non-contact jersey, and apparently he's making progress, so I wouldn't worry too much about Erik Karlsson now. It sounds like he may be on track to play the home opener. Another news story we have here is Seider getting a look on the first-line power play in practice. In my opinion, I'm still expecting it to be Gustafsson, but they are giving Seider a look, so it's not out of the cards that he gets his power play deployments. So with some other news, Alex Nedeljkovic is out week to week. Jari gains a lot of value in a ton of leagues. I already talked about this. Jared McCann is dealing with an injury. It's only day-to-day, but something to monitor. Also, Macklin Celebrini is dealing with a lower body injury. Apparently, it's day-to-day as well. So, yeah, there's a chance that these injuries are not that serious. And we learned today that Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, and Thomas Chabot are all fine. They were at practice, so nothing to worry about there. But yeah, that's pretty much all I want to talk about here. There's going to be more news in the next week. And if you want that up-to-date information, follow my Twitter/X at FIREDUP Fantasy. The last thing I need to edit in here is Valeri Nichushkin. He has a pretty low roster percentage given how good he is. And most of you have IR spots that you can put him in. So if he's available on your wire, you need to stash him. He's going to be back middle of November, guys, so you're not waiting too long. And yeah, I mean, this guy's a stud when he's healthy, so not a lot of risk with stashing him on your IR. Also, I know a lot of you have different league settings, are in different types of leagues in terms of how many teams are in your league. So with the players that I talked about today, if you want to add them and you don't know who to drop, or you're trying to figure out which player is more valuable than others, comment below, add or drop advice. Give me your league settings, comment, should I do this? Should I drop this guy? Should I add this guy? And I will do my best to answer, okay? So yeah, comment below that. All right, guys, that's the end of the video. Hit that like button if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I will catch you in the next one.